But the point is that these things actually show up. They do show up in language. They do show up in participation. And these are untold things. Oftentimes क्या होता है हमारे committees में there are conflict. There are groups here which are doing sarpanch model.
Where?
In Navy.
Sarpanch model.
Sarpanch, Grau Pradhan, President. Yeah. Right. And I'd like for you to observe that role also, by the way. Yeah.
Pradhan roles.
No, I wanted to think how many people can you say can ask you to observe a role and then can analyze your role and say, here's what you're doing. So even if you are doing what you're doing and you're given this role, but stop doing the recording. This is not supposed to be recorded.
It's okay. It's a research partner.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Dude. Okay.
It needs to be recorded. It's live on YouTube. So say whatever you're saying, man.
Okay, so in terms of saying everybody observes a particular role and has few semantics in a role. In a body like the DAO that we are going to set up, you want to observe every DAO functions differently. Right. And the ability to capture those essences in every DAO, trying to know what works and make DAOs more profitable, a baseline accounting metric that everybody has to listen to. In terms of saying what leads to the final money call, money roll, or profitability routes that DAOs organize themselves towards. In the absence of authoritative figures, there is still a cumulative, collective group decision making that happens. And how that decision making happens, which are the most successful group decision makings, like decisions that are being taken across. That is a metric that we want to capture when we are building a DAO, or trying to say, if you're going to sell to DAOs that are already successful, and if you want them to be part of our system, what is the value that's prominently visible to them at first minute, and what are the ongoing values that we can keep adding to their interactions and enriching their interactions over time. And that's really what we want to take care of, and also have a descriptive or like a non-prescriptive way to suggest modifications and moving forward how we can do things.
Yeah, so could you please go ahead once more and describe the idea of how we can leverage artificial intelligence into an existing DAO? Please walk us through certain examples.
Okay, so in a Blackboard that doesn't work.
No, there's a whiteboard, which works actually.
Ta-da! Can't even write, but anyway. So AI right now has two major branches of thought, computer vision and NLP right now. And in NLP, you want to actually do 2-3 things. Capture conversations, not just transcribe and stuff like that, but capture conversations happening in a DAO through various medium chains. Entity extraction, right? Entity extraction from DAO participants and overarching themes, meta tagging or tagging of the metadata behind the goals, objectives, projects, whatever have you, in terms of how these projects are categorized and why this DAO exists. It's not just pure profit. DAO exists for multiple reasons. So capturing that metadata around the significant entities, that's key. Then you have capturing semantics and sentiment analysis based on what discussions are happening in the DAO over time. How favorable are these discussions? Where are the friction points? What are the entities going through or perceived as going through? You can revalidate it with entity, like with participants, and do a small little survey of how satisfied you were not satisfied. But none of these survey things are going into the dump. They're actually being refed into actively understanding cohesion and cohesiveness is in a group. So that is possible when you have NLP attached to the group dynamics, capturing text, removing entities, doing sentiment analysis at the very start, just at a very nascent level of engagement. Just this much for now at a DAO-based level is still going to give us, from what I see, a lot more insight into the operating principles governing a DAO, even if they are not known by us. We are not setting out to find these variables. This variable discovery process is going to happen when you capture ER, the entity, and do sentiment analysis. Even as we do this, I think we gather enough material for phase 1 to say that we can project or speak about our studies and what we've done for at least understanding DAOs as they work in the real modern world today and build that out. Second thing is, let's just say phase two. Phase one means capturing that kind of data and actually verifying the existence of good data points that could pivot or help steer a DAO going forward. Simply to have a DAO bot. Okay, and this is random flagellating of thoughts. Okay, please do not take this as anything more. But you could easily uh, have a DAO bot or some kind of a bot which is going to encourage, say, the moment there is inflammatory comments, and people do have inflammatory comments on social media, blah blah blah. But the moment the tone and nature of things are going far outward, you could have a DAO bot just try to highlight that this seems to be a um, high energy comment or an inflammatory comment, and therefore just bring attention from the mods or to the mods, and therefore being an invisible participant, or also encourage actively saying that maybe you could replace it as such. You can help people restructure their text even before they type it, which is what Grammarly does today, by the way. But the whole point is like, do you want to reduce your inflammatory tone? Do you want to say this way? And that kind of suggestive text writing behavior that a DAO bot could provide, if you look at the text and give text suggestions, can also yield to us having a database of saying which of these suggestions were adhered to by participants, and did they actually reduce their sentiment in terms of saying, did they reduce the corpus of what they wanted to say in a better way, and does it help in participatory dynamics over time? So this is a key factor, but it could be a product flag.
Okay. I have a question here. So,
Go ahead.
I think since we're not whiteboarding, so we can like sit here and actually without the camera we can start. So it's live stream, so we can share this with other people also later. Okay. And so I'll just keep it here. There's actually a person there already.
Oh really?
It
Oh, really?
shows one person.
Okay. Let's go there.
So where
Turn the camera back on.
you want the camera?
Let's do it.
Okay. Front camera. I think we need some lights.
I think that's good enough.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'll just put some
Delighted.
Should I put some lights? Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Hello.
Okay, it's already live by the way. So the thing is, with the Discord channel, when I think I'm trying to turn on the AC.
So, anyways, what we're trying to do here, just to give you some background and context into this particular edition of what we're trying to do, is one, we're doing a basic whiteboarding session in terms of how we want to structure a product in terms of aiding DAOs the world over, and how we want to help identify areas of like interest, problem areas, and also how to make DAOs the world over more profitable or more fluent in the way they conduct their governance exercises. Yeah.
Right. So today we were talking about. Let me just push this also to other places where people can see this. Research with Mr. Johnson.
Oh,
And
look at that.
can
All right,
put
interesting.
This on our launch, like research. Hey guys, we are discussing something around AI and metadata live, and we are building on. Okay, so and probably we could put this on the mirror also. And general chat. Join on the idea of AI and metadata. Okay, so let's see what happens. And I think we are back. So the idea is that what we were discussing today again. What? Why do you laugh?
Go ahead.
So there's one thing which I would say that we should definitely discuss is this idea that what the future of DAO looks like, essentially in terms of when machines become smarter.
Yeah.
And how do they, how are they going to function, and what are their, so one important, what are their aspects which probably could connect to society, and how are they going to do it? So this is something which we should be focusing on in terms of those, probably you could see how this COVID crisis happened. I mean, not going so far, and then how this could be leveraged. I see that now these days there's a lot of organizations wanting to switch towards something that has, traceability and openness to their system. So, what do you think? How is it? Where do we see all of this happening?
Okay, so right off the bat, I'm going to go directly into a few points in terms of saying, okay, if you have a DAO, what's really happening is that people are interested in trying to solve problems. One, they're trying to get the message out, or a few messages out meaningfully. And every participant in the DAO, it's just not just the DAO, it's every participant in the DAO is interested or has a few common thought processes at play.
Right.
And one of the key things is to maybe capture the thought processes that are going on at a very initial state, and to capture much of the one ongoing seed or seeders of thought. If you look at a few DAOs, and if you see that there are certain usually points of influence or people of influence who come in and try to define the structure, try to define a few goals, and keep the energy going until the DAO actually accomplishes a few milestones, things like that.
Right.
How well the entire population adheres to these particular points or people, how well the given assumptions of participants as they enter the DAO, and their interests, so to speak, those interests do modify over time. But if you've captured basically original intent, which can be done, using text analysis, you can capture intents of people as they journey through a DAO. And really, one of the reasons you can capture text-based information, but you can capture attrition rates. The reason why people usually leave, there is some opposition that they sense, or greater opportunities elsewhere. There's a rate of growth in terms of saying, these are the goals, this is how we'll try to achieve them. A lot of times people take issues with how these goals are achieved, not the goals themselves. And again, some part of this metadata can be captured right off the bat. And so the future of DAOs.
So you're talking about conversational metadata, basically.
As of now, yes. It can go into multimodal. In fact, if you look at text, audio, and video, you can notice finer, subtle points of arguments, sarcasm, the way one positions oneself in a DAO and talks about things that matter to them, about how much validation somebody feels or creates in a DAO, how those starting principles emerge.
Right.
And influencers seem to emerge out of a crowd of nothing. That happens in every DAO. And so
but we're dealing with something privacy agnostic, and do you think people are going to be willing to share the data in terms of okay, value based is fine, you might want to know how many Ethereums or Bitcoins do I have in a wallet to be able to conduct a transaction, but there's something which I have seen in the crypto community, for example, if they have a DAO related to a health, they're processing some they're managing a community which is a non-governmental community, and that's basically giving them something, medicines or something, and there's some health care behind it. So how do we see this thing working? So on the DAO, they vote and they propose things, and they talk about something, proposals so. Are you suggesting that we should do some analysis on the proposals and how people are interacting? So basically, you mean to say that it's a social kind of a network that we are trying to inhibit within that frame, and then we're trying to extract information out of it and sort of generate intelligence or meaningful insights out of it, and then give it back to them and say that, hey, this is what you're doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing, forecasting you mean. Do you see in that same way, or how do you envision this working in a product essentially? So, because crypto products can be a little bit different and they might not necessarily involve the same approach of how you see, for an example,
How you see?
like how you see, that's what I'm saying. Like, for an example, if you see like a company that's processing information, right now a company might not be processing any information. If I mean on the DAO, I mean they might not want to process any information. They might be offloading it on some other space, which is like a general computing, right? So how do you see it happening? To me, it looks like that I can figure out like there's something. One example is that I can figure out a proposal, that the neutrality of the proposal. Where does it actually say? You know, where does it go through? Do you think that this is something which we can do?
Well, I for one see a product category opening up right now as we speak. One particular product category is actually one of meeting assistants. Post-COVID, a lot of people are doing remote, and a lot of people have recognized the need that you can be effective remotely, and they need tools to adhere to it, like to get their job workflows more efficient and effective over time. And so the existence of Fireflies.ai, Chorus.ai, which is basically transcription services for Zoom meetings to identify the people or participants in a single Zoom meeting, for that matter. There is already a product category that people are opening up to, that people are buying into, and having their meetings recorded and transcribed. That metadata is being captured actively. And so if you look at DAOs and the future of DAOs as well, there will definitely be space and room for people to have their meetings written, transcribed by a bot to some degree, and then that data being used, the utility of that data is relevant to the DAO or relevant to each organization as it stands. But what Zoom and people and Zoom is basically bought Chorus.ai just straight very quickly.
What is Chorus.ai? Could you please?
Yeah, Chorus.ai is basically it's basically transcription services. Chorus.ai acts as a plugin on top of a Zoom meeting, and this meeting is being recorded for internal purposes.
So they can kind of like figure out what's going on. But don't you think that's kind of anti-privacy? Like, for an example, like you just maybe you might be like discussing your opinion about like the government, and then government like, and they how do we know they're not sharing this data with like people outside the scope of the domain?
Everything inside. Well, leave Chorus aside, but what we are offering to people is free and open source. You can check the code, you can figure out where your databases are, you can see the analytics stream engine and say, okay, this is what data our code is putting out, and this is what data is being contained within the system, and it's false. And so there's an audit that can take place. So your routes to ensure, say, like privacy, and essentially any sort of you can always choose to go off the record, of course, and like try to stay outside the transcription of things. But the whole point is that when you are getting your data and your team meetings transcribed and all of that, there is more insight to be gained. And so this is something where in the encouragement of transparency for DAOs to function meaningfully and not enforcing I think this is subtly enforcing participantship and how rules of engagement are to be had. You know, and so I think it will still fall under the purview. It won't be a privacy issue as such if code is visible for audit for everyone, and the data routes or paths where the data is stored is actually visible to anyone.
You mean to say that if we make the code available for people to view the things that's being basically doing the analysis, it's like modeling that needs to be like available, something like that.
Yeah.
So in that sense, yeah, like that's actually probably going to work because people are going to probably. But I think the proof of pudding is that they need to know that, for example, the code which is getting executed, that needs to be provided as a proof. Okay, like this engine has executed this particular instance of forecast or the AI or whatever it has been outputted. So how do we do you do you believe that such kind of system can be built on like this kind of environment today, like on even right now? So I'll put you like this. I'll put in front of you this idea. You have a DAO which basically manages some kind of a fund. Let's just go with that simple DAO. And definitely there's going to be, so to me, but I'm finding it very hard, like how do we put this together in the way that you mean, like we're probably talking about interactions being recorded, but on DAO what happens is that or any kind of crypto related or like product usually are around the idea of sending some transaction or some value system in place. You know, so how do we make sure that we're just capturing something that could, how do we even know that whether this is the feature one?
Yeah, no, I'm listening. How do we even know? It's a good question.
That's the idea, you know?
So, well, I think firstly, every interaction that people have in a DAO is to first, initially, is to make every interaction worthwhile, accountable, and also have this fabric of accountability that subtly enforces participation on a very equitable frame. That regardless of who brings in what money or what triggers an audience in saying, oh, this guy is the major influencer, blah, 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 in any sort of decision, there's a reason that people can push their bargaining chips, so to speak, forward as they speak. And that usually what happens is people belong or feel that they are empowered or disempowered in any DAO over time. These points are reflected in participantship, in the language that is being spoken in the DAO, in terms of people voting, in terms of movement forward towards real world goals. It's not just about the movement of money towards here and there. It's also about establishing rate of relevancy in the real world about what are we talking about, how quickly are we moving on certain things. So these questions that always stay afoot in terms of justifying a group's existence or a participant's presence in the group. These questions are always up for grabs. I'm saying that you can find out as you capture more and more intelligence or more and more conversation data, you will be able, or at least be in a position where you can capture conversation intelligence arising out of these conversations. And I think for a group such as a DAO and its participants, they can actually look at themselves working together and realign based on certain thoughts. And that will really help too.
So you are suggesting that this MetaDAO should have this feature where we could kind of like have the conversations, like could be, for example, measured essentially.
Yes, to some degree, yes.
So one part is the measurement, right? So what sort of information are we looking to ingest essentially?
So first is like multimodal data capture, right? Capture conversations across text, Slack, voice, audio, video, blah, blah, blah. That's one. Once you've done that, you can do a bit of entity extraction, like I said before, but you can identify people, goals, projects that are having people's attention. Then, based on that, you can also still identify sentiment analysis in terms of saying who are the participants who are keenly interested in a few ideas, what are the categories of these ideas, and try to identify group categorical leanings, as it were. Every, meaning, like to avoid the DAO becoming an echo chamber of its own reality. These are not simple things. These are subtle things that plague many, many social groups. And so, sentiment analysis on certain topics, which are those topics on which certain opinions are influential or are rather extremely fundamentalistic or fatalistic. I mean, not fatalistic, but fundamental opinions always usually arise for people to gather around. So these things can be captured.
So I have something in my head which is forming right now, is that like we might have to end up creating a system, but that's kind of like, that we have this application with basically listening to the conversations. And actually it makes sense because before every DAO there's a conversational DAO, sort of like, which is happening at any end of any product or any group that is working on a research.
Hey, let's make it out. Yeah, it's a conversation.
So it's a conversation in the end. So we're basically talking about, if I'm understanding, But the hardest part here, which I have to figure out, is that how do we compose this together in terms of decentralized approach, that you have these machines getting trained. And I think, in my opinion, if we could come up with these decentralized approach of training these products or these conversations through different machines. So that's a different project altogether within this, actually, and which is very exciting to see. Like think of like a AI which is distributed in nature. Okay, and this AI code is essentially incentivizing whoever is running this node, the bot, whatever, and it's the training. And now you're not, like think about this, like you're just like one, you're not captured with one single zone or a software or a server. Now you could use different kind of machines, securely train these data, and hey, and like for an example, there's a DAO running somewhere, and you can ask, hey, this conversation, analyze, send it to 5 different machines, and these machines collaborate all that data together. Okay, not the machine, but the network. And whoever has sent it, they have to kind of like pay for it, obviously. So they pay through some sort of a token, and then they receive. So they receive the proof of the execution that has taken place. If there is an answer, they receive for it. And obviously, a consumer would, like someone who has asked for analysis. A compute token. I think there are many compute token already available. So we could start building on top of them already. And have these single nodes and have this as a separate project out of it.
It's interesting. Well, a compute token is also basically also an attention token.
No, it's not. We're talking about compute token. That is not. It's not an attention token.
A machine's attention token.
No, we're talking about execution token, basically, like a machine that's basically going to execute this code, okay, or more like a virtual machine that is basically going to take place. The machine has to essentially understand the idea that, hey, there's a finite amount of resources that is being put on it. There is a certain time that this machine is going to execute this code. And after that, if it halts or something happens, it needs to report back, okay, this has finished. And how much time it has taken, what are the results out of it, whether we can trust. Because, for an example, when you talk about the ideas from the hardware space, that the trusted hardwares are also in place these days. Like, you can figure out that these are trusted hardware. So we talk about computation, essentially heavy computation that can take place in a non-trusted environment.
Oh, beautiful.
And then it can be fed in back into the system, saying that this is the calculation amount, this is how much it should be costed. And if the person I have this answer also, if the person is not willing, whoever paid for it is not willing to accept it, saying that, okay, this is not what I anticipated and this is not something which I want to see, then this problem or this particular computation can actually go back into the network and still stay there for a finite amount of time, where we find the other buyer who can buy this based on the need and the understanding of it. Right? So it's a system which I'm trying to figure out in my head, that how do we place them together, like so that it works in a very decentralized way.
Right.
So any thoughts on this?
I would say, they're conflicting thoughts.
There's always conflicting thoughts, because
in the midst of conflict, you will always have newer ideas that might add
value.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And, I think the attention towards, like saying, having compute tokens or transparency of compute elements in a non-trusted environment, that's fair. That's actually fair, because AI models do take significant time to compute, and there are certain model training times and feature embeddings that you want. Yes, they do take compute infrastructure, they do take compute time, and based on the nature of an existing DAO framework, in terms of pluggability, the actual validity in terms of saying a DAO is actually generating these many analytical points or data points already, to make sense of it, or have a data scientist run through it and a human in that loop also. Even as you do this, yes, you can generate information that is meaningful to DAO participants, and based on the nature of that one DAO or many other DAOs in existence, have compute data that's specific to them, and therefore have a traceable execution unit or a token that defines, hey, this is how much it costs for us to crunch your data. You could do that, and that is not wrong. You amortize the cost onto someone else, in the sense the machine or the execution costs therefore become the responsibility of the DAO to say, hey, this is burning so much data, do we need this, blah blah blah.
Right, like it's basically like the community kind of decides on the overall participation for the AI that's taking place.
Yeah, you could choose to ingest more data. You could choose to
You could
ingest less
choose to like
data.
say that, hey, no, we don't want to ingest this much of data because this is going to require a lot of resources.
You could have a phased introduction, and this is entirely like participatory driven, or you could bifurcate under MetaDAO different compute modules and saying that okay, this is going to do sentiment analysis, this is going to do basic entity recognition, this is going to do DAO preparatory interfacing, this can generate, this is the intent of the DAO, these are the goals, you can do some kind of thing over there. You could make those as product categories or product slab components. Where
and
people
how do we put them together, like within a product, let's say?
Mhm.
Like, is there a different cycle, or is there a different part of it? Like, how do we do that?
in terms of the in terms of the product itself, or like how do they what's your
anywhere, like
route
for
to-
example, like that's what the idea, no?
Mhm.
Like anywhere, like you can say that you have something. What do you say? The idea that where do you see this whole product fitting in?
I see this product being as a pluggable part of a DAO where people are saying, okay, we are investing millions, we want this thing to work. And if you look at people trying to, the seed or the seeders of every grade, like every community or every grid, so to speak, like in terms of like the DAO and the participants in it. And I use the word grid in a judicious, non-hierarchical manner. Like the whole point is that participants come in with a sensibility, so have that like to plug in this DAO or the MetaDAO into their communication channels. That kind of integration kit or needs to exist, or an API interface where you're able to plug in like into the Slack channels, blah blah blah, and Zoom or video calls. Once that is there, I think just this pluggability of this small shadow product that's saying like okay, it's there, it's existing as a fly in the wall. What it's outputting is essentially this kind of intelligence or this kind of report on saying how strongly like how strongly worded are the arguments, or how what is the DAO standing by, what decisions are they taking, and just to have that also visible beyond the chain.
Like you mean to chain means what?
Behind the blockchain, in terms of like saying a set of decisions has been carried out, done. Next set of decisions.
I think it's look. We should not get involved into the idea of behind the blockchain, and what we should do is the approach. We should focus on the idea that like how can we make it not similar to the like what do you call the traditional systems or the architectures in terms of like how product is shaped. Like for example, if you go to a product, let's say Codestrat.ai, so the source code is closed. Their product is built and trained internally somewhere in a machine. We don't know where it is, and it's the community participation in terms of the product is only closed to a few people. So we have to get out of the. I think this is what we have to do. We have to get out of the idea of blockchain here. We have to try to figure out the approach that hey, we are trying to build a new approach towards, let's say, distributive applications essentially. So blockchain is something too mainstream, to be utilized right now.
So allow me to. So the chain, in terms of what I was trying to say, is still a term that says these are the chain of decisions that a DAO will take. It doesn't need to be any blockchain. It essentially indicates like what's really a blockchain. It's an immutable. It's like an immutable linked list with more features. Essentially, that data structure. Like I'm not talking about the existence or the verification or the verifiability of the data structure. I'm saying that any group takes decisions, a DAO takes decisions, and then in time there's an immutability to the decisions that it takes until it revisits them. It makes amendments to what its own decisions were, or it makes newer decisions. So there is a linearity to the decisions that a DAO can take or will take that has led to its profit structure, that have led to its law structures, or whatever it is. So I'm still saying that there is this set of decisions that a DAO constantly keeps taking, and the quality of these decisions over time yield in cohesive participantship, or they can lead to just attrition.
Right.
Yeah.
Attrition means like what here?
Attrition basically means that the nature of DAO participantship has not been fully understood today in the world. There is no such framework that says, okay, we are trying to participate in something that's decentralized, that is autonomous. Once the decentralized autonomy is given,
Mhm.
then in terms of how well things turn out is actually largely driven by the individuals whose vision, core group ideologies, all of that matters, and those things are not really captured today.
Right.
And so effectiveness of once you're being given the autonomy, what are you doing or how you are doing is something that's keenly every participant's thought process. How do I do this? How do I make this larger structure, or how do I make myself more meaningfully absorbed or of value in this DAO, in this structure? So that thought process constantly exists, and sometimes the environment itself proves you right. Okay, great. We were in this DAO, things are working, blah blah blah. Some things you weather out. So this thought process is going to be engaged in more detail. Again, if you look at how Aragon is trying to position itself, become guardians, they're asking other people. They've identified a common community role in terms of saying empowerment or mediatorship is critical or crucial for conflict resolution right now. Then, as you go further, you will have conflict resolution, some part of it being automated in a certain way. Why? Fluidity of decision making, fluidity of environmental iteration, fluidity of, like, to achieve that, people are going to look at making these DAOs. Okay, I'm in, I'm dropping in, I'm seeing what they're doing, I'm seeing their agenda, vision, mission statement. Great, bam. I need to take a financial decision. If I'm crypto rich, so to speak, and I need to take a few calls in terms of saying, I want to change the world in this particular manner. You might not get neck deep into anything, but you will go knee deep and saying, I'm going to commit some finances and resources. I'm going to revisit this DAO when it comes through. People will have that or want that visibility going forward. And this is the nature of DAO participantship as I see it over time. More and more people having a lot more chips to move around will then have an availability of multiple DAOs to actually push their chips across and get more bang for their buck, so to speak. And I see every bit of trying to make a DAO more better in terms of for the participants themselves. I think that will become a good point for many people to engage with, like, and engage in saying, okay, here's what we want to make our DAO better. How do we do it?
So I think one more interesting example, since we're talking about engagement here, is the idea that how do we engage, how do we how do we make it more engaging so that people do not have to, like, a community do not have to participate in such a way that they feel like, oh, we have to work for it. So one way of is incentives. Second way is to make independent bots, like trained bots that are essentially like machines, or we could say consciousness.
Here's an investor bot. It's like, this is representing investor profile 1, 2, 3.
I think something that is which can be utilized as a service rather than something which comes from a top approach, like, okay, the one who can take decisions, rather than someone who can suggest or assist in decision making, like saying, okay, this is what it looks like, something like that. And what happens is that like a bot that basically impersonates some personas or something, or like, for an example, a lawyer bot, like a bot which basically have a law sort of like a standing. So for an example, if somebody's trying to do something, like, say, in the DAO, like, hey, putting up a proposal, so the bot should basically define that, hey, look, this is what you should be using in the terms of the terminology, and this is what it should be happening, this is where it should go. And for an example, legal bot, and or like a voting bot, like for an example, if there are less participation, if there is a less participation from the real humans, from like, let's say, for for a given time, then our DAOs automatically is being overtaken by these bots, which basically does the voting and do even propose new proposals also.
Yeah. Okay.
You know,
Okay.
yeah, like something like that, and then provide.
Proposals kill all human beings. How many bots vote? All in favor say aye.
So no, but there's going to be at least one minimum human that has to be there. There's going to be something like
Wait, I was sleeping. What, guys? You want to kill us all? Okay. I approve.
So that's something which I think I am looking in that way. Like if we are able to do that, then we have like something interesting that a lot of communities do not have to, because the human values should be put into the idea that the human should put their time into their self goal, like which is to make them healthy, which is to make them better or whatever they want to do it, right? Anybody as a human or anybody as an individual would want to do it. So what could happen is that it could save a lot of time and effort, and one could kind of like put an automation and trigger and say like, okay, this kind of proposals, legal bots should be able to take care of it. And if there's a DAO taking place and there's a conflict happening, and now there are not enough participants that are able to vote on a certain side, so DAOs should be integrated in a way, or bots should be integrated in a way that they should come and say, okay, we would look at all the options and we will decide at the last resort, this is what our judgment is going to be. And then everybody with the idea that it's beneficial for all the sides essentially. So we have to put the game theory in the DAO, in the bots also. It's to understand that what are the better situation scenarios for everyone involved here.
Here's something that I want to throw an idea with you if you catch the ball. What about, since like what you said, like have a bot stand in replace a human being, and also within a legal framework of things, but then consider a Jeff Bezos bot on a high frequency DAO.
Right.
High frequency trades. Why I'm saying this is because
what he will do.
If you think about, look at the personality, or trying to say that if you have a bot try to.
So how are we going to train personality based bots? Like for example, it's easier for me to go online and not online, but I can make a bot for myself, right? Let's say. Are there are you willing to make a bot for yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Twice over, 10 times.
10 times.
I have 10 personalities.
10 times.
No, I'm saying that. So this is something that I was actually I was part of this project where we were actually trying to recreate or automate certain features of the CTO that I was working with. And it turns out that some of even as you replicate features of a human being, you could. Here's one small route to do it actually. You can capture every textual conversation. You can capture code. A programmer who outputs code is actually speaking a computable language to a computer. That means there is a what is that? You can compute the knowledge that they've come up with. So when reading a programmer's code also gives you an insight into their computable thought processes. And code styles are a thing. You can look at code and commit frequencies and look at the definition between the metadata entered in the commit tags versus what code was output into the code base. And suddenly you have an NLP structured natural English, which is reasonably a free-flowing grammar. And its direct relationship to a computed program code, which is not free, in the sense that it's a bounded grammar with rules of bounded syntax. So even in that space, you can actually look at creating bots of people. You can look at creating parts of the computable mind. Right now the richness of thought that a human being conveys in their daily lives is hugely surrounded by so many things, but a small surface of their character, a small surface of their stances, their ongoing stances, even as they change on certain things, can be captured and replicated, dare I say, in a bot. And so this is something that you should see happening soon if we don't get on that bandwagon. But
so whose personality we should be able to I think what we could, in my opinion, what we could do is we could start with someone like Satoshi Nakamoto's bot.
Oh wow!
you know,
Yeah,
someone
Satoshi
like
Bird.
him.
Yeah, Sushi
And
Bird.
Sushi Bird. And what we could do
What's
is,
up, guys?
no, that's not how he talks.
I know, I'm kidding. Nobody knows how
we
he
could,
talks.
no, there is, you know. There is someone, Anis. Oh, please, can you discuss the ethics and risk of such an undertaking?
Ah, Anais.
Okay.
Oh,
Who's Anish?
Anais.
It's
It's
like, where are you from? Could you please
interaction.
please, like, some more information, or would you like to come and contribute here? Some more info.
Of which undertaking specifically? I think.
Yeah. Which undertaking you mean to say? Since we were talking about, I think that's a nice question. I think that has been already answered or something in a way that since we've started. I'm based in London. Oh, cool.
Okay.
Would you like to join? Would you like to join?
It's StreamYard. You can join.
StreamYard. Hang on. Come over here.
I mean, they're already here.
No, he's I think from London. So in the sense he's from YouTube, right? So what happened is that there's a no from StreamYard. So please join from StreamYard, Anis.
Yeah, then you can be a video.
Then you can be participation. No?
Yeah. So let them figure that out.
So what we were discussing is the idea, the approach that of like taking a bot, and I think the understanding is that we have to.
Oh, okay.
But I am a she.
Yeah. The name is Anais. No, like it's a feminine.
No problem.
Anyways, if you could outline your question or elaborate a little bit
please
on which
outline your
undertaking.
question.
Yeah, like in terms of saying, there are multiple ethical questions, or rather, it's not. When you think about the ethics of certain things, you already like. So if you can elaborate on that question.
That was quite funny. Like, I cannot join now, but I'm a she. Like, how does it even matter? You can still join. Like, whoever you are, we're not going to, judge you or, I think that's where the ethics starts. And this is where we want to place ourselves, So, yeah, please outline your questions in terms of the ethics and undertaking. But I would like to answer here is that there's some sort of time that I've spent on this, like understanding that how one can sort of like put the approach is to have a guideline, like sort of like not a rule, but it's more like a soft guide, which essentially does is that, for an example, if you're developing something, so at least the core developer should have the same understanding, or should be at least on what you would say is the same pages, in the sense, what do they believe in, like for an example. I'm not saying that they need to be like similar or like set alike, but the governance is definitely, because we all are different, and I think we have to enjoy this diversity. But what I am
speak for yourself.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So I'm different, right? So since I'm different, then I can actually like come up with various different understandings and specifically ethics or moral values. So this is something which I feel is that we need to be able to give time and space. So rather than like, for an example, one pure example, if somebody comes up with something controversial, and capturing the personality, sure, like take your time. You can join us on StreamYard while we are discussing all of this, no problem. So as like one example is, this Timrit, this girl which the Google, right, that thing happened. Timrit Dabru. So I would like to put myself into that space. Then I would say that if I were her boss, like I would have put myself on stake that hey, she's doing right, and would have put. So this is putting individuals before an organization. And if we do that, what happens is that we kind of put more or less and vulnerable states out of an individual. And then we can really identify like, okay, what's the truth here? Like in terms of, there is no such thing as singular truth, but we have multiple perspectives put together and we can form an opinion. Okay, what she has written is something that the world needs to know. We also needs to accept, because in a way that the company has kind of, or the organization has itself sidelined, say, we don't want to accept this truth. It's actually like saying this is her truth, what she's vibrating through this, but we don't want to accept it. But here, I would like to make a change here, that I would like to accept that there are infinitely many truths, right? But obviously, we cannot listen to all of them. So there's come a problem of discord here, which I don't think we're going here. But since we're talking about ethics and undertakings of the machine development that happens over, any place in the world. So given that example, like I would like to have, someone who's working in our research team, they should have complete freedom, like in terms of whatever they want to do, and whatever, even if they write about something that is not what I kind of like agree with, but that doesn't mean that I should stop them, so that is where I would personally like to put this ethics in front, like, okay, as an individual, like, and she's not someone who's like, putting her own views on social media and saying, oh, my paper, not my paper, but my article, which is not even properly researched, is here. But she has researched, she has worked on it, and so it's basically not something half-cooked opinion, right? It's it's not even an opinion. It's a scholar. It's a scholar.
Peer-reviewed,
right? So you can't like simply just dismiss it, because the moment you dismiss it, you're giving it more fire, essentially, or to speak like you're providing it more fodder for everyone to sort of believe onto your ideal. So this is something which I would seek. I don't know what about you, like what do you have to say here? I have exemplified with a real example.
So well, if you look at Timnit Gebru's case, and this is going to be really interesting now that you brought that in, is that in the nature of Google trying to suppress opinions, there are two conflicting elements at play in. Let's just say that Google is running or being run as a DAO, and that is not true.
I think Google is not running as a DAO. But if it would be running as a DAO, I think we would see a lot of tremendous, like, amazing products coming out of them.
Yeah, well,
they have still amazing products, but some of them are like, it kind of like gives you goosebumps, like, okay, what's going on? Like, for example, email, right? Or for example, their Google map service, right? And how they want to push this narrative of Android also, like, with the AI and everything.
So if you just say that there's an effective DAO that becomes like a Google-like entity, let's just say that the inverse is true. There exists a DAO in a multiverse of concepts that will soon become an Alphabet or a Google or a better thing.
You are saying a DAO that becomes Google.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of not possible,
No.
Why on a DAO?
What?
Yeah. It's not possible, no? Because then you will see a lot of folks that the community wouldn't want to, because then it's centralized, basically. And that's against the philosophy of distribution, or like the approach of decentralized, coordination that's happening, So then it's like, again, like,
one DAO might try to gain priority over other DAOs and say, hey guys, look, we reached the highest profitability, blah, blah, blah. We need to do our shit. We can help you. And
profitability, I think you have to also understand profitability is something that all DAOs might not want to look at, actually, because some DAOs might just be using there for voting or participation or community management, right?
True.
So profitability, obviously, but when you talk about profitability, what do you mean by DAO profitability?
So in terms of profitability, it's not just about the money. Like, the whole point of participatory dynamics playing out, just the ability for people to participate and have value addition and also value extraction from a group. Okay, that's just a small but very critical part of how participantship is ensured. Like, nobody's figured out, and this question's out in the open, DAO principles of operation and how that will play out over the next coming decade. Is a thought process that few people have already started thinking about and are meaningfully engaged in. And I'm saying that discussion is going to become quickly recognized. First thing, and I still want to address about Timnit Gebru. The very fact that she is a participant in an organization which
Right.
is not DA, decentralized or autonomous, hierarchical power, centralized hierarchical organization. But even if you're there, what she's got is that whatever she posited in terms of compute, not competing with each other, like Facebook versus the Facebook AI team and the Google AI team. And this is hearsay, so I'm not going to talk too much about things. It's like the Google AI team was given a directive. Oh, these guys released these many billions of parameters. We need to shoot them in the foot, essentially, and engage in this competitive behavior where we are training 10x the parameters that they are training and come up with a higher quality of service to the bots. And this way, even as we induce competition, or we are stepping into the competitive ring within Facebook or within another entity, they are missing out on the larger point. One is that AI supremacy and the AI wars have begun. Governments are have competing budgets and employing scores of people around us. So that's why it makes sense for a person understanding AI ethics and the ethical ramifications of entire teams of smart, driven people trying to win over each other in a competitive framework. That is essentially one large quotient of understanding how Timnit Chapru and whatever friction that she encountered at the team would be brought to light.
Right.
An AI ethics person, yes, they may have. So there's this vicious loop of that she is already in Google and is a verified scholar. She's teaching people, so she has some clout in the industry. And then having a job which is a verified value proposition to researchers worldwide, because if you're working at Google, people are going to listen to you or want to listen to you, and you get the upper end of the stick, because benefit of doubt. Hey, she's at Google. She has a better vantage point. So there is lesser friction of entry in a peer-reviewed journal. So, what Google stands to claim over Timnit Chapru, just saying,
is the values, no?
Yeah,
conflict of values.
Conflict of values which is the main organization, Google,
Right.
but also somebody not looking at the subject matter expertise and saying why they should engage, because AI ethics is all about what projects and why those projects, and essentially the ramifications around them. There's definitive thought processes at play, and not just business competitive interests. I'm saying that Google can very much say that your peer-reviewed journal entries and your articles may stand to reason, but you will always find the other end of the opinion finding some mention.
Hey Anis, how are you?
Yeah.
Is that the correct name?
Could we pronounce your name
Yes,
properly?
Anais. No, that's correct. Anais.
Ah, nice.
How are
So
you,
could you-
both of you?
Good. Could you give us a bit of introduction about yourself?
Yes, sure. Well, my name is Anais Frank. I can share because I've been on YouTube before. So I
Okay.
came through your video through the Avalanche Discord, but I'm more from the Ethereum background. I'm a technical steering committee. Well, soon there is an election, but I was a technical steering committee member for the Baseline protocol. So mostly on the enterprise Ethereum side of things. So typical integration, IT integration, and then joining the enterprise blockchain sphere. Yes, I was really interested in what you are discussing, which is not my, I would say, professional area, but in terms of the world, the bigger picture, what is possible and how we are merging basically individuals, I would say, so their identity and their digital identity and the implication of using those new technologies, something that I'm candidly interested in. So yeah, in a nutshell, I don't want to say too much, but yeah.
Glad to meet you, Anais. Good thought processes, and glad to know you're working on integration.
Yeah. So what are you? Well, I'm not 100% clear. What is the agenda or your topic, or are you just really sharing thought on your current area of research?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, well, firstly, we're discussing perspectives on saying one, DAOs are on the rise. There is going to be a need for understanding how, like, there is participatory dynamics in every DAO. So every organization that steps outside the business profitability route or the accounting and auditability route that governments enforce on organizations, in terms of how shareholders are exercising their thought processes or directions. DAOs have a different way to operate in the world, and therefore there is definitely some commonality or at least some route to efficient operations in DAOs the world over. And this domain space should open up as long as one, there are more people in the crypto space, which there are more people having or wanting to make the world a better place, and the route to making the world a better place is something that's not fully understood. And so MetaDAO essentially aims at capturing those perspectives, trying to help people better run their own DAOs in a free, in an open source manner, in a transparent manner. And what hurdles people will meet on the way as they work towards a better version of society that they're building on for themselves and for the world at large. Yeah,
There is one view which is a bit controversial, is people who will actually participate in DAOs and benefit the most from it are people who already have a high level of, I would say, digital literacy. Those are technologies. Those are already people who will have a certain level of, I would say, access. And access not being determined by their country of origin, but by either to some level of education or their curiosity of in the realm of technology. So two people can have similar access to the internet, for example. I would say to the same to Google, let's say, but what they will research may be very different based on their perspective and the things that they are the most accustomed to. So while there are a lot of communities who want inside and outside the technosphere, I would say, make the world a better place, do you think there could be a concern that the level of outreach needed to be maybe more inclusive in people contributing actively and kind of benefiting to, has to be increased significantly? And that's the different objective of DAOs right now. I understand, like, if we contrast with the way corporate work now or private enterprises work now, it's different. It's more transparent. It brings more accountability, more mechanisms for automation, which means that it won't be obfuscated by maybe some kind of power move or things like that. But at the end of the day, there is a component of human nature. It doesn't really matter the systems in place. Humans will have those. So when you are talking about the personalities and things like that, I think it's very early days to understand what, at the end of the day, is just a tool, a way to achieve a certain outcome. But this could be used as any tools for many purposes. So I would be curious to see, if the majority of DAOs goes in that direction or not. Yeah. I don't know if that goes into the sense. It's just big high-level thinking. I'm not going into from a societal level.
We want to stay with these problems, and I think high level, or there are no levels, there are no hierarchies here. I mean, at least to begin with. There is something interesting, as you mentioned, which I am also like. I occupy myself a lot of times. Like, how do we enable someone who's not, as you said, that someone who's not sophisticated enough or educated enough to be able to understand this. So first problem is this. But I think one step at a time, like, for example, in an organization, if you have made equal participation for the employees and other people who are working for the organization, then I think you've solved a bigger problem, right? And then the second part is this, that, you take this to adopt, you basically adopt, go for an adoption. And how it happens is essentially you have to educate essentially. So what you see right now on the internet is the exploratory method for Web3. Things are breaking. Sometimes people are sending $9 million as a gas fee here and there. So
Yeah.
things break. And Web3, by and large, I think thankfully the Web3 people or people who are behind all these movements, right? These so-called anarchist people are behind the movement. What happens with them is that they are also, the temperament is so such that they're calm and cool people, right? So they're also willing to learn and understand about the world, that the way it is happening. So earlier I was reading, just to phrase an example here, like I was going through this Gitcoin, right? So Gitcoin runs this program called Kernel. And if you look at their kernel about and documents, like their general website, which talks about things like brotherhood. It talks about things like how in this world we have to live, and what are the approaches, reclaiming internet, and things like this. As if you're. So every bit of Web3 is about a fight, a fight with the existing internet, right? I think this is where we are. So zooming back from there, definitely the adoption rate is I would say it's actually very fast, like 5 years, the industry has zoomed into something where now suddenly, I will tell you something that people from different walks of life are coming up with the, understanding and spending time on it. I mean, for someone who is not even a computer guy, makes the bell, rings the bell, like, hey, our systems are centralized. Centralized means there's someone single, someone who's basically sitting in an office, have no clue. Out of nowhere, he decides a policy, and my life is changed. There is something which I think anybody in this planet understands, that at any given country or anywhere, even the educated or the uneducated, because this is something which is essentially available for anyone. So it's beyond the idea that one cannot say that, hey, this is not an understanding.
Yeah,
This
the
is more
concepts are
it's,
easily
yeah, as a
understood,
concept,
but
people
the
do understand.
usage, yeah, it's.
So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. So usage is something which I think the hand-holding has to be done from people like me and you. Like for an example, I'll tell you a very small example, example that we see happening in our societies, right? Any given day. Like there's some event or an accident that happens somewhere, for an example, just a pure fictional example. So it's an event. This event is about social situation where you can see, for an example, a bureaucracy has taken some step towards implementing a policy, and so these bureaucrats or so-called policymakers have taken it based on the data and the understanding which they have. And fundamentally, this is what I have found out, that when I talk to or anybody, if you have found out yourself, I think maybe when you talk to anyone who comes from a traditional understanding, they find it very hard to grasp all this technology, specifically Web3 and everything, because it's a bottom approach, right? It's not something that's coming from a top, and people are accustomed. So I would say it's an individual that's been trained essentially from last centuries, right? And training is not something that you can go and educate them and say that, hey, get out of it, and you will be getting out of it, right? Training requires a bit of time. Maybe in our lifetime we might not be able to do it, but there is a possibility that individuals get enlightened. So the idea of enlightenment happens over many cycles of boom and bust, on economies, basically. Right now, for an example, and the approach here is that I definitely correlate with the idea that if we are able to at least, by the inclusion of an organization or any organization, by the inclusivity, gets to lay out a plan that doesn't require any central authority, you have already won, because most of the times the popular opinion, behind your popular opinion, there is a certain truth that the society definitely wants, right? I mean, rest of the things are garbage, right? But if you're able to generate value around that, in that garbage, if you're still able to, then we can slowly clean those pockets. And once we started cleaning those pockets, then you have some shining areas, right? And then you can put light on that, and then probably go and sort of say, okay, we have to clean here, we have to clean here. So it's a collective effort, definitely. And I think the world is slowly aligning towards it. I mean, people like me and you are like, okay. And, they're basically like getting into the shape and saying, and I think energy speaks about it, right? So for an example, you are interested into it and you might be able to like at least influence four people around you, and it's like, hey, there is this new kind of system that is being built. And I think I agree with the idea that the third point is that humans are humans. They're meant to um, run in a chaotic way. And but I think that's where the understanding also comes through their chaotic nature. And there is no certain fine line or a boundary you can say, like if you see a child and he goes out and he plays however he wants to unless it is stopped, right? That the same principle is being applied on gravity also, like 100 years ago, from the point of view inertia. Now since we are now in the age of Einstein, right? So we have to enjoy the multi-perspective or multifaceted understanding. But if there is a value associated to it, we can bring change. And I think we can bring change to because like if you go to social media, nobody gives a fuck, right? I mean, nobody gives a shit about anything, whatever they post, whatever they, because there is no value associated, and it hasn't happened with them also. So unless it, like, I'm not saying that the bad thing should happen to them, but the idea is that there is no score value which is associated, because you can just go and post anything. And that's how a big nations, and I think, like for an example, country like India, they corrupt these systems. I was reading an interesting article or a paper from someone which talks about that the internet, what we see, which needs to be trained, is actually getting polluted essentially, because there's a lot of garbage which is being filled in by state actors or by people, like intentionally, because they want to collude or create this environment where pollution is there. So when there is pollution, it's harder for anybody to understand what's going on essentially. So you have something, then you have like thousands of other variables that are nothing to do with it, not related to it, but they are there because there is someone who's fueling or sort of like using technology to fuel all of that,
Yeah.
So I think this definitely will not answer your question, but there are. Yeah.
You were trying to answer that question.
So
Oh no, it was just a overall like general statement about like a view. But,
it is, but I have something interesting to share with you in terms of how individuals. So I think the change needs to happen on an individual level, and how does that happen is that the sheer observation. Organizations of the future are going to be built on the idea of observation and space. This is a new terminology which I'm using. Observation means that we will observe the actions essentially. Like if I am taking an action, I'm going to observe it scrupulously from different dimensions, different perspectives, and then make an action. Okay, if I'm making an action, these DAOs are essentially going to monitor, at least this is what I see. For an example, if you make an action in, let's say, London, the effect of this DAO, how does it affect something in India, can be measured. And if you are doing this, then we can actually say that, hey, this particular effect has created this particular social change. And this is where, we're trying to connect our threads, right? Like most of our research and science and the academics are about connecting threads, like, from different, and pivoting the stories around it and saying that this happened because of this happened. So one example is like, what do you call this? Human caused induced climate change. Now, this can fit into the idea of DAO. For an example, if a DAO is being used as a climate mitigation in London by the government and in India, we can figure out, at least to begin with, and have individual participation, not on the grassroots, obviously, but I think people have their opinions, and I think I don't mind personally. I don't have any problem in listening to, but you can't. Human life is finite, right? So if you will spend time with
for
now, right? So I would like to stop here, and I would like to throw a question at you.
Yeah, sure.
What do you mean by an ethics specifically when you say that there should be? For an example, I will ask you like what ethics should be there, and what sort of undertaking should we take when we are discussing all of this. What do you have in mind?
Yeah, so I may have caught Sorry. So who is Johnson and who is Sarah? No,
Johnson.
okay. So I
Yeah.
may have hi. Johnson, when he was talking about something in a very specific context, but what I heard was how we can capture personality traits based on how the code is written, based on other items, and basically use those to establish bots and bots behavior. So you were talking about
Yes.
Jeff Bezos. And this
Yes.
is where
Oh yeah.
what people choose to put in the world may not be a reflection. And of course, if we talk about developer code in open source, for example, which is something very technical, it's less subject to judgment, I would say, and less subject to biases, but it still shows the thought process of the developer. And I don't know if you saw that GitHub a few months ago had announced their feature based on basically thousands of projects that they are scroll, and so they can help developers. And some developers were like, "Oh wow, they are going to steal our job," but so
Yay, bots.
yeah,
our jobs.
yeah. So the ethics is there not a concern that by having those personality traits established based on what is online, we have just, you were talking about seeing things from different perspectives, but that only gives one perspective. It's like one snapshot based on one or many pieces of content, and we are trying to establish, and it's a bit the same like online advertising, right? Depending on the browsing behavior of an individual, we will basically have socioeconomic, being able to deduce is this person a female, what are a male, what are the interests, and things like that. So the ethics is kind of related to this. And I don't know how these bot ideas that you are talking about is related to the DAO thing. So, but that's one of my concern. If those remain anonymous, there is not a concern because we are not able to link, I would say. But if this is done and people are not aware that this is done, you see
Alright.
where this is
Breach
going?
of privacy. Yeah.
Yes. And even, I would say, yes, there is a privacy concern, but there is the issue of personalities will be even more labeled, or people will be even more labeled than they are, based on those kind of,
Liability,
which could
you
be,
mean, right?
yes, I think that for certain groups which are more vulnerable or more at risk, even in the tech sphere, that could pose significant problem.
So okay. What comes to mind for mine, like, and I'm not trying to address your entire scope of thought, which I wish I could, but maybe we talk a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think trying to define the fallibility, like the fallibility of human beings as participants having malicious intent. And even as participants having malicious intent or the potential for harboring malicious intent, and some participants have the risk appetite to act on that malicious intent. What do we mean by malicious intent in this case? Malicious intent could simply mean a little bit more money for me in this DAO and a little less money for you in this DAO, simply because I learned a little more than you. I went to a better college than you. I perhaps have a better thinking or thought process than you. And some of these claims seem to be so beautifully justifiable. Also, okay, fine. You suggested the idea. You said this is the direction to go in the DAO. You set up a few meetings. You help people to look at things, and therefore there is some credibility associated with that. Yeah, there are legitimate routes to power. I'm stating this in a very, in a context that is sensitive. In any participatory framework, DAO or otherwise, business entity, government or otherwise, there's always this essence of leading opinions inhabiting this sphere of thinking. Who's thinking at what level? And there is every bit of possibilities of saying that human beings have flawed perspectives, which can change over time, and some people have non-flawed perspectives which can change over time. You can go from a good thought to a bad thought. You can degenerate from a great thought to, and both ways.
Yeah.
And so really what we want to look at, if you're looking at human beings as flawed participants, having flawed perceptions, having selfish interests, still beyond that, the group or core ethos around having everybody meaningfully getting some value from participating in a DAO, say, which is going to be different than being answerable to the government. It is just basically 1,000 eyes or perspectives on one topic, and conviction, moving, actually not just conviction. Convictions in a group cause great alignment. Great alignment can be both tremendously positive or tremendously negative. A negative one is mob lynching. The ability of a mob, say in a crowded place or in a market, to capture a person who is convicted as a thief and then to execute justice on them by slapping. Everybody thinks the person deserves one slap. Turns out 1,000 people think that that one person deserves one slap, and he gets 1,000 slaps.
Right.
You know, you see the conflagration of a group opinion often happens without the group's knowledge that they are a group. See, and so at one point of time, somebody might feel, I slapped him once because I was angry. It was a triggered reaction from my side because, well, he must have taken my sister's bag. So my sister slapped him once. I slapped him once because I had some ownership in the state. And people observe one slap, two slap, thief, everybody calling him that. And therefore everybody beginning to slap. And don't let him go. Permit him to the higher authorities. I'm saying that even as this is happening, and opinions do spread as convictions in a group, what we want to look at in terms of ethics and ethical behavior, it's not just human beings who are marginalized, say, in a group that says, you know, hey, look, 20% of the crowd got 80% of the profits. There are actors who act in their own interest, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, the remaining 80% have got 20% of the profit. This is unfair. Even as people can point out or highlight that, sometimes it's often the case that the route to power or the route to validation of observability by an in-group or an out-group, those in-group in the sense, in-group who stands to gain, the out-group who doesn't stand to gain. It could be anything. It could be power, it could be money, it could be influence, it could be just agreement on a topic. All of this still points to the fact that human beings are calling each other out on these particular areas which are growing larger or smaller. And these group dynamics are still yet to be captured meaningfully, as much as I know, into a platform or a framework where bots can be verifiable stewards of saying the language is becoming incendiary. The group is moving towards one particular or a few particular routes of decisions where they're headed towards, okay, let's mob lynch this guy. Sounds like a plan. Everybody thinks he deserves a slap. And to suddenly have this intent captured in the minds of all group participants in the DAO. Let's just say 1,000 people, and the bot is saying, oh, dude, everybody is upvoting this decision that's going to kill one DAO participant or kill somebody else from another DAO. Like the bots could essentially, as long as, you know, people, like bots can actually spot this. We can spot sentiment analysis, like using these things, and actually voicing out an opinion without having go through a data analyst saying, oh yeah, this is what we think that the group social dynamics is heading towards, a fundamental opinion on this particular topic.
Yeah.
So, you know, so the group can stay averse or away from these particular opinions or things that could lead them into an infallible state or something that could, you know,
yes, I understand better now. So have you read or are you aware of the book Weapon of Math? So Mathematic Destruction. So
Weapon of Math.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the development of those bots themselves is subject to people who are developing them having biases, exactly, having their own mental framework and their cultural biases. And it's not, from the research so far, it's not unusual. Sorry, yeah?
The book name is, I think, The Math of Destruction, no?
Weapon of math, like mathematics,
Weapon of
math,
Weapon
math
of
destruction. Yeah, math destruction.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
It's
about
not.
the data science, no? This book, right?
So it's about our algorithms.
Right.
And as an extension, I would say the bots and sentiment analysis, people who develop those themselves,
Right.
they will, those tools will inherit from the perspective and biases. For example, you have to put the boundaries and the limits. So when do you decide when a sentence has been said enough time to raise the flag once, to raise the flag twice? This is subject to cultural perspective, to gender a lot, and those type of things, to those sensitivities. But because so far, people who are actually building those algorithms and those bots tend to have the same profiles or perspectives on things, it
Right.
actually does not provide the intent is there. Everything that you said, I fully align, and I want to see this happen. Don't get me wrong. So I'm challenging and pushing a little bit, but this is what I want to see as well. But from a practical where we are now in terms of technology and ethics of the technology, the research, as far as I understand it, has shown that unless those ethics committee and there are more people contributing to the development of those bots or algorithm, a lot of flags won't be captured because they are not even captured because we have those kind of
That's a nice thought process.
blind spots.
Yeah, can I point out in saying that what you're saying is sufficiency, data sufficiency, or sufficiency in terms of have these scientists or data scientists or people involved in making such automated perception having bots, are they going to induce their bias into the systems themselves because they cannot see it? And that is that's a good thought process. One that I can, and I'm keen to say or address that in a larger framework we can jump over this one particular area that seems like induced biases in bots that already exist in scientists. We can actually go around that by actually having democratic audits of bots, introduction of many people looking into bot behavior. The code being open source can be evaluated by a smaller team or people who have awareness of how to evaluate code, and but also in terms of saying putting trust in machines, in terms of saying how this works, is a tricky area. It is something that people are very concerned with, and this is at the point where we try to introduce or ask for scrutiny. Asking for scrutiny in terms of where things can go wrong, simply because what you're trying to address is, have we covered enough surface area for conviction and saying, okay, is the context good enough to move towards a decision? And I would say that as time passes, one could already recognize the fact that, let's just consider a small parliament, okay, or a political group. Keeping all sorts of decorum, people in that layer of arguments posit arguments and proposals to the government. There is a chair. Policies and arguments are directed towards the chair, and then there's group consensus. All in favor say aye. All in favor say blah, blah, blah. All in favor say no. Nay. The point is, even as this happens, there is a group decision making at play in highest office or in lower circles. And for us to say that bot makers, so to speak, and the introduction or the legitimacy of thoughts being output by a bot, I think that this is an organic problem that will find organic steps of resolution. Today, you may say that this is invalid, but in due course of time, bots and the rate of dialogue and the explainability of how a particular thought process or a particular statement is validatable by a bot can be shown. Like there's a route. You want to build explainable AI. So, and
the concern of black box and not being able to understand, as you said, the thought and the decision-making process of where how the bot takes action and on what triggers and to what extent is something that having this transparency, the scrutiny. So if it's open source, I know not everything can be open source, but this is where
But
having.
we want to put
Yes,
it
I
open
love
source.
it. I
The
think
data,
that.
the analytical modules, movement
So
towards it.
I would like to take a different approach here, like
Mhm.
which I have discovered myself here is the so there is this interesting thing which I think I also agree with that. Do you know about the von Neumann, the
Von
guy?
Neumann.
Yeah. So the history of that guy is that he came from Germany or like some European time.
Mhm.
No, not European time. Sorry. So what happened was the story goes like this: that in America he was pursuing the current that president, right? That time around 70s or 80s, I don't know what time. That to bomb Russia with nuclear bombs.
Okay.
And you are 100% right, and I think there is no one in the world right now addressing this problem that we individuals have to change. We can code thousands of things, we can do this and that, but we always end up materializing our thoughts into the algorithm, and this is a proven fact, and it has been proven by various scientists and researchers around the world. Like the black people in US, they are convicted more because the machines that they use to figure out a crime or an investigation scene is biased. Not even biased, like there was this incident which I was reading recently. There was a guy who was passing by an ATM. That the ATM had an incident few couple of weeks ago, and then the ATM had this machine, camera machine, which basically did the facial recognition and said that this is the guy who did the crime, and that guy had no way to do with it. And then he was brought into the cell. And you know what? So fortunately, that guy had a lawyer, right? And usually, someone like from a black community, you can think of right what bad could happen. And his lawyers were basically saying that, hey, why did you actually got my client here? So like the court and everybody, what they said, like the computer said so.
Yeah, computer said so.
You see,
How
this is a
surprising!
My name is computer.
And I completely agree with the idea that the algorithms today needs to be built on a fundamental shift that is the humans, and we've not have traumas recently. I would say like how I mean, you can say in the 70s there was a trauma of war that created the whole world, right? So then you can say that people wanted to take revenge, and that's chaining the thought from the von Neumann, where why he wanted the American president to unilaterally decide and bomb Russia, because he had that moment that he wants to take, like, I want to destroy something. And you're totally right, and we can change this actually. How we can change this, that to bring individual change essentially. And individual change means that we're talking about educating these researchers who are filled with this material ego, which is basically like So when you dissolve all of these equations essentially, so we can actually code these equations. People haven't tried it, but we can. So these are mathematical equations. They're not algorithms. I'm not going to the algorithms. I'll go to the algorithms later. So when you basically drop the idea of I, what happens is that you're basically you're giving rise to an independent thought process, right? And it's easier to follow that chain of thought process that is independent. Like, for an example, coding a solution that does the visual mapping of a road or a traffic license, or probably like in a criminal investigation. Now what happens is that we eventually we have to realize that we are going to code our biases. We are essentially going to, because I am a computer programmer. I'm going to like say, okay, this thing needs to have this particular weight or a variance here. Like, I'm going to set it 5%. Now there's a huge amount of data processing that happens through our brain, and that's why I'm coming to 5%. For that, we need to train ourselves to be able to see things as they are. Yeah. And that training is important as an individual, not to put, because if we're putting biases, and not to put it is again a bias. And how do we get out of it? We have to create machines that are we don't have to create machines. We have to create individuals that are trained through these modules that allow them to have, like in general, what do you say, like this approach that is conducive and filled with probably understanding that how to treat or how to adopt, and so once you do that, so that can take place only when humans want to change. Now there is an interesting thing. If you see, rather than changing ourselves, we are like focusing on the idea we should change the machines, and fixated on it. It won't get us any far, why? Because there's so much of deep psychological embedding that is being played out every time you code something, right? So how are you going to change that? You have to fundamentally change the material, like the physical ego that we carry, embodiment. Like, okay, I am this, hence I know this, and that stems from the past of our work. Like as Johnson started, that people who come from the background of say like someone from a big institution or who has worked on big problems and maybe they have solved big problems, fine. But the persona and the energy that they carry is a built up. It's not real. It's a puffed up energy that they carry, and they put all of these into their equations, into their mathematics, or into their science, and create that kind of surrounding. And unless that stops, then only you can.
Yes.
Because, for example, a researcher working in an AI is only like you read any article, magazine, science magazine. It just talks about someone researcher helping another researcher reaching somewhere because they are same. They are like somewhere thinking in a same environment. Now I'll give you some real examples, like people who have coded Google, they are very popular with their misogyny and their womenizers, right? Approach yeah.
Are you still live on YouTube, by the way?
Yeah, we are live.
Oh, okay, good.
Hello, everybody.
So
controversial opinion right here.
Yes.
The system has been coded by these people. And what do you see? You will see such you will see all these biases stemming. And this is what this girl from last couple of months was trying to prove, that, hey, and actually that is challenging the status quo and nobody would like to get challenged. And that's why they fired her. That's all. And so she's not saying, hey, your code is not good. She's actually triggering the biological suit which all these people have carried. This is the same thing which happened with Android co-founder who slept with someone in their company, and she was fired. He wasn't fired because he was an intelligent there. He could produce that code. You see, there's a bias there. Now, how do you deal with it? You deal with it with compassion. Unless you have compassion within yourself, you can't deal with it. You know why? Because you won't understand the problem you won't put yourself into the shoes of the other person. And the moment you put yourself, plus you don't need to you have to see things as they are, because the other person is going through an emotional discharge. You will also go through. Like the CEO of Google, he slept with someone who was a marketing guy, women.
Oh, Google will come after you, like specifically.
Yo, buddy, you talking about me? Why?
No, I mean, I'm too small actually for him, honestly. I'm too small. I'm not even known. I don't even have social profiles. Even if he come after me, he'll basically say, oh, you have to write an apology. And honestly, I will write an apology, but I will say this in apology that this guy doesn't want to change. What can I say? You know what I mean? So the approach here is the individual shift. And these programmers, I think I have an interesting optimism here. Is why interesting? Because programmers and the computer guys or people who are in technology are willing to change. They are listening. They are saying, okay, we need to change this narrative. Because they start from the technology domain, this, that, building blocks, and then they realize, hey, this is a human problem. This is not a technology problem. Because this is something which we are kind of giving it to the machine. And the terrible thing is that nobody wants to face it,
Yeah.
And no, some are facing it. Yeah.
And this is a social value to DAOs, because the democratic process has a lot of merit, and it has always some flaws. Let's say it like this. But having a mechanism which is independent, I would say, of DAO participants, to even if veto is not an option, but at least to raise those concerns. I think I'd read somewhere that Salesforce has developed Einstein. Like they have actually a tool. They have the branding for their bots, Salesforce Einstein, and they actually build that, like brings that tool to their board meeting and other meetings. And regardless of the participants, this tool actually look at the data and interpret the data and provide an independent view and an independent view. So, and I think if that's what I'm still not sure what you're trying to build, but if this is it, that we have DAO's participants, we have a common objective, but we have this mechanism which is independent of the participant, but who is able to monitor, observe their behaviors and being able to give them knowledge about their behaviors and to either facilitate, incentivize the good, positive one, or prevent, even veto if possible, because if there is a link to the smart contract and the bot just block whatever it needs to block, that's even better in some instance. Some people wouldn't like it, but
I'm not
that
going to
could be
give you
good.
money because you're talking too loud.
Yeah, so I think that's great. That's a very big, I would say, undertaking, but there is definitely, I can see some very good value, not in terms of the technology first and foremost, but in terms of the regulation of group dynamics, because it's not because there is a voting mechanism and everything that those human nature good and bad thing won't influence the DAOs. There will be good DAOs and there will be bad DAOs. DAOs
Right,
which
so-
have a value, and DAOs is like just for, I don't know, speculation
anything.
or money, like that. But it's normal. It will always be like this. There is not one thing that human will design which will be at other end of the spectrum. It will be somewhere. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I would like to add something interesting here, and that's why we call it meta, because the idea is that meta is something that you can look within yourself. So DAOs that look within themselves, you know, and
Wow.
you know, yeah, like, so,
DAO
Like,
introspection.
yeah, let us take all
Let the DAO
like
bot
10
meditate.
10 days of no work, you know, like how about that, right? Like, and actually, you know, the approach here, which I'm trying to bring in here, is something mathematically sound. Also, there are like concepts like ad infinitum or infinite regressions, you know, in place that are already there, and they haven't been yet tested by anyone because they are too risky, you know, and in the way that they don't work probably.
But what is
Why?
it exactly? Could you develop what this is, this feature?
So this is called ad infinitum. So the ad infinitum is a concept where anything that leads to infinity. And what humans have done is, so far in the mathematics background, is that they've reduced everything to finite numbers, you know, saying that, hey, we can't deal with infinity, so why don't we just deal with finite things, right? And that's why we ended up inventing a lot of, you know, imaginary stuff, right? And I believe that that's actually does a lot of good and a harm also, right? Like, for an example, things like Schrodinger equations that are kind of, you know, you can't grasp them, you know, because they're paradoxical in nature.
Yeah.
They're actually infinite in nature. So anyway, so the idea is that there are solutions in nature and in an infinite within infinity. So for an example, like let's say in terms of what you were just mentioning, if you look at any system, any given system at any particular time, the system doesn't go to chaotic states. Why? There is actually a chaotic state, which is infinity. Why it doesn't go? Because it's being preserved through a measured state of time, and it's being like preserved because it's supposed to produce or create a deterministic outcomes. Now what we are dealing is the DAOs that are introspect themselves, how they can do that they need to go into, if they go into, let's say, like any actions are being taken from different DAOs, right? So we're basically saying, hey, they are connected together. I mean, we're assuming they're connected, all of the DAOs in the universe or the pool in a given universe, they're connected together. And any action that's being taken place, it's essentially typeless. You know, there is no type, or there is nothing that basically, because type means that you're defining things.
Yeah, you put a label. Yeah.
These types will become self-emergent, like, and
so-
they will converge and they will diverge. These types are.
They need to actually diverge. If they diverge, then we will have an understanding where they are heading actually, and they will head towards a similar outcome most of the time. and then we will be able to sort of collapse the whole system and say, hey, this is the answer we are looking for. For example, in democracy, multiple perspective, multiple voting systems, and vetoes in place. Now, let's say if there is an argument which is basically, or a vote that is essentially a type, right? So which is going into a site saying that there's some action has been taken, the state has been preserved, and you have this state that is producing another state, right? Now, this state could essentially help us to understand of a given DAO, let's say, or a given vote, that where will it lead to? Because it could lead to infinity, but it won't. There is no end for such thing to happen. You know, there is no end that it could lead. So yeah, what you want to?
I have a question because I don't believe in when it comes to DAOs and interaction within participants of a group of isolated action, because action, a vote on a given matter may impact a vote on another matter, or who gets into the management of the DAO, or who gets into this or where the grants are allocated.
Specialization. Yeah.
Yes. So having this view, even like as a stream of, and I don't know if that is something that you are looking into as well when understanding the overall direction of things, or if you prefer to look at in the atomic way, like, okay, this
atomic
is it.
Way.
Okay.
Atomic
Okay.
way. So atomic way, were basically the states that the traversal of the states that may happen or may not happen. But for an example, if somebody comes and say that this is my action and this is my state, right? And then if this is a type, then you can consume it. If it's a defined type, then you can definitely consume it. If it's a typeless, then the system will collapse and will go into infinital regression essentially. And from the previous states, it will try to determine what it could lead to. So if it could lead to yes, if it could lead to no, from the previous states essentially. And it will take at least, it will take like minimum amount of time to be able to come onto a decision. So it's a decision matrix. Not a matrix, but a system based on infinite regression, essentially.
Okay.
So, you know, and it's not like a system that is based on hierarchy. It's a system that is based on connecting links, you know, like chains, or like imagine different DAOs as atoms, and they're connected through a chain. And, you know, so you have these, and wherever it is affecting it, you will sort of, you know, have the effect or a counter effect in different chain or a different participant or different actions, like as you said, the impact based actions. So this is something which can be used in a conflict. So for an example, one point of state leads into a conflict. It will, for an example, one example or a story which I have written down in a document is that there's a guy who goes to a genie and he says that usually a genie in a traditional books or a history is defined as someone who grants you 3 wishes. There is actually a hidden message there: infinity, infinity, infinity. You know, because he cannot give you more than that. But this guy is smart, and this guy does what he says. Like, no, I want my first wish to discard all the rest of the wishes, but I want infinite wishes. So this genie says, okay, you're smart. I have to go and burn another meta lamp, and I will have to keep this process as long as it happens. And the moment I will encounter the god genie, you know, or something like, which is the top genie. So the guy is getting a little confused. He's like, what the fuck is this god genie? What is this?
I wasn't aware that there was something on top. Yeah.
But yeah, so this guy is like saying there's something on top of top, but genie replying in a very humble way that, hey, look, there is no top. It's just connectivity is there. We are all images, and we're going to ask each other, and keeps on this process till the infinite loop. Not finite, sorry, infinite loop. But there is no end for it, and you might get your 100 or 2,000 wishes granted, or maybe like infinite wishes granted. This system is essentially about typeless entities to be able to cover variations of edge cases or something which has not been defined. Mostly any system that you take or cover or you see in the world is a type system, you know, like to give you a brief idea. So what we've learned from the genie is that, yes, there is a possible way of our learning, and it could be implemented as a meta or a self or to find out where the current DAO stands or where the current action stands. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Rather than saying, oh, this is not in the process, this is in the process.
So what is like the primary use case? I understand what it does, So,
Oh.
but from your perspective on going, I don't know if going to market is the right
you-
thing. I don't
this
even
case-
know what you're planning to do, to be
Yeah,
honest.
okay, I will-
But
No. The interesting use case is to produce carbon emission-based tokens out of these organizations that are participating from all around the world. So this system will spit out emission-based tokens and will reward whenever there is a sale happen for that carbon emission. It will reward back to the entire organization, whoever is producing sustainable businesses. And that's where we see the change can happen, because these organizations will go into these kind of regressions, and they will understand the social implication from their experiment, all of these organizations, based on these, as you can see, which is happening on the internet. And once that starts happening, these top silos will start moving, because their movement is based on where people spend money, right? So that's how we are sort of like planning. I mean, we're actually preparing a pitch deck, ma'am. I invite you also to help us if you wish. Like, and
I'm
we can
happy to
also-
look at it. I don't know if I'm the most appropriate because I'm not familiar with the specific industry that you are targeting. But in terms of pitch building and stuff, yeah, I'm happy to help with that.
Sure, yeah,
how
like
can I
that'll
do
be
it?
interesting, you know.
I don't
So
know.
that'll be nice, actually. So I think we should conclude now. I mean, unless you want to share something.
No, that was a total random. That's the beauty of internet and Web3, I guess. You just see a random link on Discord, you follow. It's like, okay, I will just take some time to see what it's all about, and you end up having a very interesting conversation with total strangers. So that was a good exchange. So yeah, thank you for this. Nothing else.
Why
really.
don't you send your email or something so that we can? Are you on your Discord with which username?
Yes, I think. Yeah, I will ping you on Discord. That's fine.
Perfect.
I will ping you
That's
after that on
amazing.
Discord.
Okay, Silence, thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, nice meeting
No.
you, and nice discussing
Yeah.
finer points of group participatory dynamics and how this will pan out in the next coming decade. And it's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, ciao, bye.
Ciao. Thank you very much. Okay. We
So
should
this was
end.
before we end, let's do I think this was a good foray or thought process
Oh, yeah.
brainstorming into where things can go. And maybe we're looking forward to have many more of these kind of discussions that will eventually result in product features or thought processes that govern a lot of people what people are thinking about and what
Sure, yeah.
what is the surface area of issues to be addressed. Yeah, but all right,
All right.
let's do this shit.